My best friend asked for my support after escaping a decade of toxic relationships, but the moment I expressed genuine concern for her safety, she accused me of being negative, dumped years of hidden resentment on me, and walked away from our friendship. My best friend, who's 28, recently got out of a really toxic relationship. I'm 29, and I've known her long enough to know this wasn't her first time dealing with someone who didn't treat her well. In fact, she's been in back-to-back abusive relationships for over a decade. And I don't say that to be judgmental, just factual. It's a pattern I've seen play out in her life for years, and as her friend, it's been heartbreaking to watch. So when she finally got out this last time, I was really proud of her. I could see how much it had taken for her to leave, and I knew she needed a reset, not just from him, but from the whole cycle she'd been trapped in. She told me she wanted to just enjoy being single for once, something she hadn't really done in years. She wanted to focus on herself, feel good in her own skin, maybe have a little fun. And I was completely supportive of that. I told her she absolutely should. She deserved to feel free, to explore what makes her happy, and to start healing in whatever way made sense to her. I want to be as transparent as possible about my role in all of this. I've never been the emotional, overly comforting type, not because I don't care, but because I process emotions differently. I'm autistic, and the way my brain works is extremely literal and logical. I understand emotions, I feel them deeply, but when it comes to expressing empathy in the typical, neurotypical ways, comforting words, emotional gestures, I often fall short. My default coping mechanism has always been humor. I try to lighten situations with jokes or sarcasm, even in moments that probably don't call for it. It's not out of disrespect. It's honestly just the only way I know how to keep my footing when things get heavy. And for what it's worth, she's never once said my way of communicating made her uncomfortable. She never gave me any signs that she felt hurt or dismissed by how I spoke. If she had, I absolutely would have adjusted. Anyway, after the breakup, she started doing what she said would make her feel good. That included going on dates, sometimes casual hangouts, sometimes more than that, with guys she'd always had a little interest in but never pursued. Some of them were people from her past, some were new. She'd get excited about these dates, and I was always encouraging. I told her she looked great, reminded her to be safe, offered to give her rides if she needed one, especially if there was any drinking involved. I never wanted her to feel stuck or unsafe, and I definitely didn't want her getting behind the wheel under the influence. I was never judgmental about the fact that she was going out and meeting people. Quite the opposite. I thought it was great that she was finally getting to explore what she wanted, without being tied down to someone controlling or cruel. I know how damaging those past relationships were to her self-worth, and if being around guys who made her feel attractive or desired helped her reconnect with herself, I supported that. She even told me she was keeping it casual and not taking anyone too seriously, and I respected that. It wasn't my place to interfere or to judge her process. Still, because I care about her, I did bring up something a little deeper. I told her, gently and only once or twice, that while it was totally okay to go out and have fun, she might want to take a little time to look at the underlying patterns that had drawn her to those toxic men in the first place. She had admitted they were toxic, so it wasn't me labeling them. These were things she herself had said. So I encouraged her to use this time to work on herself, not just to avoid falling into another version of the same story with a different face. I said it from a place of care, not criticism. She never seemed offended by it. If anything, she seemed to agree at the time. At least that's how it felt. There was one thing that concerned me, though, and I kept it to myself. When she'd talk about the guys she was seeing, she wouldn't tell me much. She never gave names, just nicknames or where they were from. She'd go meet up with them after just a couple of conversations online, and there was never any mention of a last name, background, or even sharing her location with someone. I'll admit, it made me nervous. But I didn't say anything. I wanted to respect her autonomy. She's an adult, and I know what it feels like to have people try to control your decisions under the guise of concern. Plus, I have my own stuff I'm dealing with, my own trauma, my own life. I've learned the hard way not to try to fix everything for everyone. I've just always tried to be a steady friend. Not perfect. Not emotionally expressive in the traditional sense. But loyal. Practical. Safe. I want her to feel like I'm someone she can rely on, even if I'm not great with the mushy stuff. I try to show up in the ways I know how, helping with logistics, offering rides, listening, giving space when needed, and always being honest. So things came to a head on a group call one night. It was me, her, and another friend just chatting casually. She brought up how she was thinking of going on a getaway trip with one of the guys she'd only met twice. I didn't say anything at first, just listened. but I remembered both times she had mentioned him. She said he drank a lot, described him as a party type, and even expressed concern that he might have driven home drunk after their first meetup. That stuck with me, and not in a judgmental way, but in a worried way. I care about her. And even though I try not to interfere, when she asked, would I be crazy to go? I gave an honest answer. I said yes. I started to explain, calmly, that alcohol can alter how a person acts or shifts their personality. I was in the middle of making a point, not shaming, not lecturing, just talking about something that, in my opinion, was important to consider when deciding to take a trip with someone who is still a stranger, in many ways. But before I could finish my sentence, she cut in. Loudly. She raised her voice and accused me of being a hypocrite. She brought up this one time, months ago, when a longtime friend of mine had driven us home from a concert. For context, that friend had a couple of beers early in the evening, and we left hours later, completely sober. I'd known him for years, seen how he handled himself in those situations, and had no reason to feel unsafe. But that wasn't even the point. She didn't ask me to explain. She didn't let me finish my sentence. She just jumped in and threw that at me in front of another friend, in a way that felt more like a public call-out than a conversation. Now, I want to be clear, it wasn't the comment that upset me. It was how she said it. The tone. The way she cut me off mid-sentence. The way it felt like I was being talked at, not talked to. Like I was suddenly the enemy. It didn't feel like a moment of mutual concern or friendly disagreement. It felt like an attack. And so, rather than escalate or react emotionally, I left the call. I didn't storm out. I didn't say anything dramatic. I just logged off. I knew I wasn't in the right headspace to continue the conversation without getting overwhelmed or shutting down. I've been working on emotional regulation, on understanding my own reactions before I respond, especially because communication isn't always intuitive for me. So I took a day to sit with what I was feeling, to untangle it, and to figure out how to approach her calmly. The next night, I sent her a text and asked if we could talk. The following morning, she said okay. When we did talk, I laid everything out gently. I explained that it wasn't the alcohol comment that upset me. It was the way she cut me off, raised her voice, and didn't allow me to finish what I was trying to say. I said that I left the call because I didn't want to be reactive and that I needed time to process what had happened. I also explained where I was coming from, that I was worried. She had said herself that this guy felt like he might be hiding something and that his drinking made her uneasy. My comment was coming from a place of concern, not judgment. I wasn't trying to tell her what to do. I was trying to look out for her safety, especially considering no one really knew this guy and she barely knew him herself. But instead of meeting me with understanding, she went on a long tangent, a list, really, of everything that had been bothering her. She said she didn't understand why I was upset at all, because she didn't think what she said was a big deal. She said I was too sensitive and overreacting, that she's allowed to stay wherever she wants, do whatever she wants, and I shouldn't be questioning it. Which I never told her she couldn't. I never told her what to do with her life. I just answered her own question about whether it was crazy to go away with someone who'd already raised a few red flags. Then she started talking about how my jokes had bothered her. That I was always looking for red flags with the guys she talked to. That I was constantly saying everything was bare minimum. And I just sat there, reading her messages, stunned. Because none of this had ever been said before. Not once. She had laughed at my jokes. She'd responded positively. She told me multiple times she appreciated that I was around and that I reminded her of her worth. She'd thanked me for pointing things out. She'd confided in me when she had doubts about these guys. So to suddenly be told that I was constantly criticizing her choices, that I was being negative, or that I wasn't supportive, felt like whiplash. I felt blindsided. Because all these things that she was now saying had clearly been building up for a while, but instead of talking to me when they happened, she let them simmer in silence. And I can't read minds. I don't pick up on subtle emotional shifts. If something I said was upsetting, I would have appreciated a chance to clarify, to apologize, to adapt. I wrote back. I wanted to be the bigger person, or maybe just the adult in the room. I apologized. I told her that I was truly sorry if I'd made her feel judged or unsupported, and that I wished she had brought it up sooner, so I could have adjusted my behavior when it first started bothering her. That was sincere. I meant every word of it. But I also stood my ground. I told her I was hurt, not by her choices, not by her lifestyle, but by the way she'd spoken to me, the way she'd cut me off, the tone she'd used, and the total disregard for what I was trying to say. I reminded her that this entire conversation started because she asked for our opinions about going on a trip with someone she barely knew. That I didn't just insert myself or make it about morality or judgment. I responded to a question she asked, from a place of concern, from a place of caring. Instead of engaging with that or acknowledging my hurt, she kept doubling down. The tone turned combative again. She started repeating how she can do what she wants with her body, and if she wants to meet a guy and sleep with him immediately, that's her right. Which, of course it is. I told her as much. That was never the issue. In fact, I'd supported her taking control of her body, her choices, her freedom from the very beginning. I'd even sent her resources for birth control when she was having pregnancy scares because I wanted her to be protected, safe, in control. I wasn't against her doing what she wanted. I was worried about how she'd get home after being with these men, the logistics, the risk, the silence that came with no one knowing where she was going or who she was with. But that nuance was lost on her. Or maybe she didn't want to hear it. The second I didn't back down or retract my hurt, she just stopped replying. And that hurt, too. Weeks passed. I kept mulling it over, going back and forth in my head about whether I was being too sensitive, too harsh, too much. But every time I traced the steps, I landed in the same place. I didn't attack her. I didn't shame her. I simply told her how I felt after a moment where I felt disrespected, and instead of meeting me halfway, she shut down. Still, I wanted closure. So a week or two later, I messaged her again. I reiterated what upset me, calmly, clearly, and said that I didn't want the friendship to end over a miscommunication. That all I wanted was to talk like adults and find a resolution. I just wanted to be heard. Not to fight. Not to win. Just to be heard. She waited a few days to reply. When she finally did, she said she needed a break. That she didn't want to be around negativity or have to explain her choices to anyone. That she still didn't understand why I was upset in the first place, and that this whole thing felt dragged out. And honestly, I was stunned. She still didn't understand why I was hurt. After all the times I'd explained it, after everything I had said, calmly, respectfully, compassionately, it was like she never heard me at all. Like she never wanted to. She wanted to silence the discomfort, not deal with it. Just toss it aside because it didn't serve her in that moment. And it hit me, finally, that this was never about just that one conversation. It was about the dynamic between us, one where I showed up, gave support, checked in, stayed steady, and when I finally needed to be heard, she hit me with a backlog of grievances she'd never once voiced. It felt like she'd kept them all in a drawer until the one moment she felt challenged, and then dumped them on the table not to work through them, but to discredit mine, to invalidate my feelings. I never asked her to let anything go. I never expected her to suppress anything for the sake of peace. In fact, I would have welcomed an open dialogue the moment something started bothering her. But she chose silence until it served her, and then expected me to do the same. To just let it go. To apologize and drop it, and pretend I wasn't hurt. That's not friendship. That's not healthy communication. That's not safe for me, emotionally or mentally. So here I am, sitting with this pit in my stomach, realizing the friendship might just be over. Not in a fiery, dramatic way, but in a slow, disappointing, heartbreakingly quiet way. The kind that makes you second-guess everything that came before it. I don't hate her. I'm not even angry, really, I'm just sad. Sad that I can't be friends with someone who refuses to acknowledge when they've hurt me. Sad that being concerned for her well-being made me the negative one. Sad that I offered support in the only ways I knew how, and that in the end, none of it seemed to matter. I still hope she finds what she's looking for: healing, safety, love, freedom. I do. But I can't keep showing up in a space where my voice doesn't matter. Where care is called criticism and concern is called negativity. I've learned that real friendship isn't just about showing up in the good moments. It's about being able to hold discomfort together, to have hard conversations and come out stronger. And if we can't do that, then maybe we were never as close as I thought. And maybe that's the part that hurts the most. But I deserve to know at least.